for management and technology. With his background spanning from academia to supporting startups and corporate innovation, he's here to share with us the lessons learned throughout his journey. In this session, we will discuss how to unlock the full potential of startups, especially deep tech startups, and how we build the bridges from research to commercial value. Over the next 20 minutes, we're going to discuss different topics, including the deep tech ecosystem. How do we build it? How do we sustain it? And what kind of challenges and success factors exist in commercializing new technologies? We'll also discuss what it takes to scale globally in this high stakes sectors. At the end of the session, we will open up for Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to join the discussion. Let's start by defining the topic. What is deep tech in the context of entrepreneurship?
First of all, thank you, Hayer and QRDI for hosting us here today. Good to see so much interest into that topic of deep tech innovation. So there's some audio deep tech involved here as well, but we'll figure that out over the time. So the term deep tech, when I started my career in the sector, it was called high tech. There's people at MIT who call it tough tech. What all of those terms actually would like to convey is that the products we're talking about here and entrepreneurs building those products and building the company, there's some really scientific hurdles and challenges behind that. So there are science-based startups. There's people who have been working sometimes decades on building a certain technology. And now the question is, how do we make sure we convert that into a product and build a business around it? So everything's science-based. There's only a few smart people in the world who can build such a thing. That is what we call deep tech.
That's amazing. So what makes deep tech fundamentally different from the usual startups that you see in software and in consumer? What is the fundamental difference?
Yeah. So many of the consumer-driven startups, you can more or less, some of them build in a day. That is not possible in deep tech. So given that there is a new risk involved, every entrepreneur needs to tackle a market risks, needs to understand whether there's a sustainable business model for the product he or she is building. But for deep tech, there's a technical risk involved, which means, first of all, the cycles to develop such a startup, especially in the early phase, are way longer. This has to do with that, as I said before, there might be 10, 15 years in research before, starting from very basic discoveries towards its applied research, and now we can turn it into a product, which also means it costs a lot of money to get to that stage. So the time and the costs being involved and the technical complexity is what makes such startups fundamentally different. On the positive side of things, if you are able to build something in fusion energy, if you are able to cure cancer through a new technology, not that there's not competitors, but you're in the field with a really clear USP, something you can protect. But yeah, you need to come to that stage and overcoming all that technical hurdle and risks first.
So it takes a lot longer. The cost is a lot higher. The investment in both time and financial resources is a lot higher. How can we, in Qatar, from your experience in Europe, how can we provide the right ecosystem for those deep tech startups to start, thrive, and grow?
Yeah. So the first ingredient you need is strong science. And I've been impressed to see how much investment has been focused here to building up excellence in science. And this provides the foundation. But now the question is, you need to become experience in doing technology transfer or doing technology translation, how it's called in the life sciences, which means first and foremost, the universities and the research organization need to start to understand how and under what conditions and at what stage should I think about and enable technology transfer. So how do I move that technology piece from the lab into a new entity? And then, well, some similarities, of course, you need a team that is able to build a company, which is quite often not that easy because the technology has been built over years by researchers, and they have never contemplated to build a company before. They are not business savvy, so to speak. So the first question is, are the researchers able, or are we able to train them to get into that role? First point. Second, if that's not the case, you need to find people who understand how to build a deep tech business. Most of them are definitely B2B. You're selling into markets with a certain complexity that you need to understand. You need to understand the product and scientific part of a company. And so finding those entrepreneurs who are acquainted with that kind of ecosystem companies is another ingredient you need. And then we're talking about money. I could really, there's a clear distinction between funds and VCs, angels, they're investing in more software type companies, consumer businesses, and those who actually invest into deep tech. So you need that experience on the investment side as well. And then there's other people and things that come into play, like infrastructure. If you're a biotech startup, it's not only that you had access to your lab space to develop the technology in the first place. Once you are entering the market, you need that professional biotech environment again in order to further develop your product and get it to the market. So there's an infrastructure thing as well. And sometimes the government can also create create the fertile ground for such companies to thrive.
Let's try to get into examples. So let's say the researchers from the start, they had the intention to create something for commercial use, and they had everything surrounding them supporting that commercialization. What would be the biggest pitfalls in getting these projects off the ground?
So just for example, we're doing a lot of work in healthcare and life sciences. So first and foremost, they maybe have been working on that new therapy, but they now need to understand how a business works in that sense. How does the healthcare system work in that sense? How do you go through clinical trials? These are all things that you need to understand for the first time if you're coming out of the lab, and something people need to learn and manage for the first time again. So we can see that this challenge of overcoming, and my former manager at Fraunhofer, a large research organization I've been with, you always said, if we look at all the portfolios of companies that we spun off over the past decades, those who do not perform are the ones who are building a new research entity, which means you are used to using government grants and applying for them. Ultimately, you build that external entity, you build your private company, but you start applying just for grants as well. So now understanding how that economic play works, with the investors coming in, with markets, customers, and building a business around it, that's the fundamental challenge. And sometimes then, depending on where we are in the world, there's certain regulatory environments that make it tough to create new innovations. We have that, for example, in Europe around cell and gene therapy, just as an example where we are thinking about, and also the fertile ground again needs to be in place to bring such innovations to the market.
So the challenges are a combination of internal mindset of the founders and the researchers, as well as external policies and regulations that make it sometimes challenging for deep tech startups to get off the ground. Let's talk about the investment required. You touched on VCs and patient capital. How do you see the role of traditional VC supporting deep tech startups in getting them off the ground, given that VC is not necessarily the most patient capital?
Absolutely. It's by the way an ongoing debate whether in the long run a deep tech startup takes more time to scale and get to an exit, but definitely it takes more patient capital. The problem with VCs who are more used to investing into software companies is, as you said, they are expecting that everything is going very fast. They are not used to that technical side, the technical risk that is being involved. And then for many of those startups that are actually spin-offs, so that means spun off from a research organization, there's ultimately someone coming on the cap table, a research organization, a TTO, that you're also wondering, so what are they doing here, and why should I give and provide equity to them, which is something a lot of consumer and software-driven investors are not used to, and need to try to understand what is actually a fair deal, what is a fair compensation for a research organization when they are part of that spin-off and ultimately also the part of that long-term journey. When it comes to investment and ticket sizes, you can build a software company with not a lot of money. Maybe the first round is a million or two. What we see, and we are doing, for example, also a lot of work in semiconductors and quantum computing. There is a company from Germany, Black Semiconductor. The first round that they were seeking was 400 million. Parts of that round were covered by a government grant, by EU grant, but still, it's then a challenge to find that VC money. We are talking about seed stage. That's the first investment they get from the institutional VCs of that size. But we see everything in biotech, new materials, sustainability, that is something between just one-digit million numbers up to 15, 20 as a seed round, and that is typically not the case for consumer or software-driven businesses.
And as a follow-up on this point, how is the Creative Destruction Lab Berlin supporting startups in the context of guiding them as they navigate that startup, the deep tech startup phase and growth and maybe fundraising?
Yeah, so the Creative Destruction Lab is one of the deep tech accelerators on the globe, and was especially initiated more than 10 years ago, because we're all talking about there's great science coming out of the lab. What is always missing to get from an invention to invention is the business. What you can find in mature startup ecosystems, like for example Boston or Silicon Valley, such spin-offs and those researchers building that company, they would find all the expertise network just in one place. And that's basically what the Creative Destruction Lab is doing. It's building that 8-month mentorship program where those scientists with their very promising and aspiring technologies get access to really world-class mentors. And they fall into 4 buckets. First and foremost, exited entrepreneurs, former operators who know and understand how to build a company. Second, investors, partner level, who are writing the tickets and are also used to investing into deep tech companies. Corporate decision makers, because as I said, most of those companies are B2B at some point. They need to interact and collaborate with corporates, so having that perspective is crucial as well. And fourth, the scientist, because again, there is a scientific angle that you need to understand, otherwise you are not able to assess the venture and its potential. So over those 8 months, we bring together, right now, for example, for healthcare, compute, hardware side, software side, we bring together those mentors who have that world-class expertise, who have done it before successfully, and now offer that support and that help to the first-time founders in many cases, or at least people who want to bring that very complex technology to the markets.
And in your experience, once you supported companies over the 8-month period, obviously it'll take a lot longer than those 8 months to launch a product, service, acquire a customer. When can you tell that this company is ready to scale internationally?
So I think when it comes to scaling internationally, there's no big difference anymore to any other business out there, but you need to have, first and foremost, your first proof of concepts. You need to have a first product. You need to have that basic understanding of how a business model could look like in that B2B market. So in the 8 months, we can figure out a lot on the business side and help the company to position it in the right network, and also make sure they get the investment through the people who are sitting on the mentor bench. And then ultimately, if some of them are more, some of them are less mature. But once they have in the local market shown that it works, basically, they're able to scale. However, for some, talking life science, healthcare again, sometimes the US market is the first market they should go to. So when that is the advice, we have the network to bring them to North America or elsewhere, and let the company be started there, because that's also the kind of expertise and network that such a world-class mentorship can bring. It's not only the expertise working with that one company, but then also broadening the scope and helping them to scale internationally.
Any final concluding thoughts before we turn it to the audience for questions?
Well, just what I find here in Qatar is really promising, in the sense that, again, science is the foundation of becoming a deep tech nation. And if we now look together at all the ingredients that need to be taken into account to build that ecosystem that is also able to enable deep tech innovation, I think you can definitely build it here. And I've seen lots of bits and pieces that just need to come together, and then it will be a thriving deep tech innovation ecosystem soon. So any questions that you might have? Over there. Is there a mic for her?
Testing. Yeah. Sorry, it seems to be. Who's?
Hi, Anna Truska, World Bank. Question that I have is that I absolutely agree that building up innovative capacity is incredibly important for a region, connecting it to entrepreneurial capacity as well. But given that tough tech does have this incredibly high investment upfront that to be done, do you have any advice, suggestions, thoughts to share on which direction to choose for the tough tech? What could be competitive advantage of a region?
Pardon me, could you repeat it again?
Do you have any thoughts to share on which particular direction of tough tech a region can actually choose to invest in?
Which sector? Oh, whoa, there's many. I think what are the big pressing challenges we have globally? There's, of course, something around sustainability. So anything in energy, food, water, there's lots of things to do here. Healthcare, there's so many things still to be solved, and we see very promising signs in labs all over the world. We see promising signs in the labs here in Qatar, and so you need to start working on translating that. And there's many other fields. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen in industrial biotech, for example, turning waste streams into new materials, all around circular economy. So there's great sectors out there, but again, it comes back to, are you also able to understand the science and the way how you connect through your fund or your ecosystem to those opportunities? Is that something that speaks to your strength? And can you combine that? So there's no such play as just in Sofia, I'm just doing SaaS, whatever sector. I'm not just doing deep tech. I need to understand the certain verticals in that and building expertise in them, because otherwise you're not investing based on really wise information expertise.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the great conversation. I'm curious to know from you, Thorsten, about maybe one example of a deep tech company, whether it's in Berlin or in Canada or in Paris, that is actually like your flagship company, from bringing it into the Creative Destruction Lab and where it is today. It's just a little bit of an example of such a journey.
Yeah, so one example that I like the most, it's not that everyone worldwide already knows that company, but for example, Embiomics is a company that is from Germany that went through the Creative Destruction Labs 2 years ago, which is doing science around the microbiome. So really interesting fields, a lot of positive effects if we are able to solve that. And so their technology, they were seeking an investment round that is way beyond the typical ticket size in healthcare. And through the advice of the mentorship, they were not only able to secure the money, but also establish first partnerships in the US. So I guess why I'm telling that example is because it shows two clear value propositions of what we're doing with the CDL. First of all, we are not investing ourselves, but we do provide the people who can invest and who do invest into deep tech. Second, you see that angle of then also helping them to get the business not only off the ground in their local ecosystem, but also internationally, which again speaks to the global network that we are part of.
Thank you. This is all the time we have for the session. Join me in thanking Thorsten for his insights, and thank you for the QRBI Council for hosting us today. Enjoy the rest of Web Summit. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Test. Testing.
Test, test.
Check. Test.
verdammt.
Check, check. Check, check. Check.